The rain fell in relentless sheets, each drop shattering on the cobblestones like tiny shards of glass. The city, alive with the hum of neon lights and distant car horns, felt cold and unyielding, a reflection of Gabriel's own guarded nature. He was a man accustomed to numbers, deals, and strategies, a maestro of finances who had built his fortune through precision and an unerring ability to see opportunity where others saw risk. Tonight, however, his carefully ordered world was about to collide with something unpredictable, something raw. As Gabriel exited his sleek black sedan, an umbrella shielding him from the downpour, his gaze was drawn to a figure huddled near the steps of a once grand theater. The woman, wrapped in layers of tattered fabric, seemed to merge with the shadows. Her face was obscured, but her posture, shoulders rigid against the cold, head bowed, spoke of a resilience that tugged at something deep within him. For a moment he hesitated. A man of his wealth and status didn't typically stop for strangers on the street, let alone those living on the margins. But something about her presence felt unignorable, like an equation he couldn't solve. Against the protest of his own logic, he approached. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice steady but gentle, as though trying not to startle her. She lifted her head, revealing a face that was both gaunt and striking. Her eyes, though weary, burned with a quiet defiance that seemed almost out of place in her circumstances. "I'm fine," she replied curtly, her tone dismissive, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Gabriel noticed the way she clutched an old, weathered leather bag, as though it contained everything she had left in the world. He could have walked away. Instead, he crouched to her level, his tailored coat brushing the damp ground. "Look," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I don't know your story, and I'm not here to pry, but I might have a way to help you if you're willing to work for it." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion etched into every line of her face. "What's the catch?" "No catch," he said simply. "I run several businesses. One of them could use someone with determination." He wasn't entirely sure why he made the offer, but something told him this was no ordinary encounter. Perhaps it was the way she held her ground, even in the face of despair. Her silence stretched, the rain filling the void between them. Finally she stood, the bag clutched tightly to her side. "All right," she said, her voice barely audible, "but don't think for a second I owe you anything." Gabriel stood as well, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Fair enough." As they walked toward his car, Sofia, the name she reluctantly gave him, glanced over her shoulder as if saying goodbye to a world that had offered her little more than hardship. Gabriel, meanwhile, felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. It wasn't pity, it was curiosity. Who was this woman, and what had brought her to this point? The car ride to Gabriel's estate was silent but charged, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Gabriel found himself contemplating the unpredictable nature of life, and how even the most calculated plans could be upended by a chance encounter. Sofia, on the other hand, couldn't stop thinking about the risks she was taking. Trusting a stranger, even one with money, came with its own dangers, but what other choice did she have? The mansion loomed ahead, its opulence glowing against the darkened sky. Sofia stared out the window, her expression unreadable. Gabriel noticed her grip tighten on the bag as they approached the sprawling estate. He wondered what secrets she was guarding so fiercely. As they stepped inside, the warmth and grandeur of the home contrasted sharply with the cold, damp night. Gabriel gestured toward the staircase. "I'll have a room prepared for you. Tomorrow we'll talk about work." She nodded but didn't move. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on a grand piano in the corner and a painting that seemed oddly familiar to her. Gabriel noticed her hesitation, but chose not to comment. Instead, he left her in the care of his staff, retreating to his study where he poured himself a glass of scotch. For the first time in years, his thoughts weren't on his finances or the ever-turning wheels of his businesses. Instead, they were on a woman whose presence was already beginning to unravel the tightly controlled fabric of his life. If you've ever wondered how one decision could change everything, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to follow this journey, because trust me, this story is just beginning. The dawn broke through the thick curtains of the mansion, casting a muted glow across its meticulously designed interiors. Sofia sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room she'd been given, her eyes fixed on the ornate mirror across from her. The reflection staring back wasn't just weary, it was haunted. Her fingers traced the faded stitching of her leather bag, her most treasured possession. Though its contents were a mystery even to herself at times, it was her anchor, the last remnant of a life she barely recognized anymore. Downstairs, Gabriel nursed his coffee in the sleek, modern kitchen, his thoughts torn between spreadsheets, pending acquisitions, and the woman sleeping under his roof. He had seen desperation before, people willing to do anything to climb the financial ladder, but Sofia was different. She wasn't scrambling for an opportunity. If anything, she seemed burdened by the very idea of help. It puzzled him, and Gabriel hated puzzles that didn't come with solutions. When Sofia finally emerged, her posture was rigid, her eyes scanning every detail of the room, as though committing it to memory. Gabriel watched her from the corner of his eye as he pretended to read an email. "Morning," he said, setting his phone down. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she nodded slightly, her gaze lingering on the marble countertops and the high-end appliances she couldn't imagine ever using. "Morning. I had the chef prepare breakfast," Gabriel said, gesturing toward the spread of food on the counter. Eggs, fruit, fresh pastries, more than Sofia had seen in years. But she didn't touch any of it. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. "You're not one to accept anything easily, are you?" "I'm not a charity case," she shot back, her voice sharper than she intended. Her hands tightened around the strap of her bag, pulling it closer to her side. "I didn't say you were," Gabriel replied, his tone calm. "But if you're going to work for me, you'll need your strength." The words lingered between them, heavy with implications neither dared to voice. Finally, Sofia approached the counter and poured herself a cup of coffee, avoiding the array of food as though it might trap her. "What kind of work are you expecting me to do?" she asked, breaking the silence. Gabriel set his mug down, choosing his words carefully. "One of my properties is a boutique hotel. We're in the middle of restructuring. There's an opening for someone to assist with inventory and logistics." She frowned. "You're giving me a desk job." "I'm giving you an opportunity," he corrected. "What you do with it is up to you." Sofia studied him, searching for the catch. People like Gabriel, people with money, never offered anything without expecting something in return. But his expression was unreadable, and she couldn't afford to walk away now. "Fine," she said quietly. Gabriel nodded, satisfied. "You start tomorrow." The rest of the day passed in a haze. Gabriel spent hours buried in financial projections, while Sofia wandered the mansion, unable to ignore the strange familiarity she felt towards certain objects and rooms. In the library, a photograph on the wall caught her attention. It was a black and white image of a young woman standing in front of a sprawling estate. Sofia's chest tightened. The woman in the photo wasn't her, but something about the setting felt eerily close to home. By evening, the air between them had grown less tense, though far from comfortable. Gabriel returned to the kitchen, pouring himself a drink as he prepared to wind down for the night. Sofia sat at the dining table, absently sketching something on a piece of paper she'd found. "You're good at that," Gabriel commented, catching a glimpse of her work. Sofia quickly covered the drawing with her hand. "It's nothing." But Gabriel had seen enough to know it wasn't nothing. The sketch was detailed, almost photographic, a grand house with intricate balconies and manicured gardens. He couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a figment of her imagination. "Where did you learn to draw like that?" he asked. Sofia hesitated, her guard rising again. "A long time ago," she said, her voice clipped. Gabriel didn't press further, but his curiosity deepened. There was more to her story than she was letting on, and he couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion that their paths had crossed for a reason. Later that night, Gabriel sat in his study, the sketch still on his mind. He pulled out his laptop, opening files related to the Laurent family, the name that had been floating around in his subconscious since the moment he met Sofia. The Laurents had once been titans of industry, their empire spanning real estate and finance, until a scandal had obliterated everything. He had always admired their rise and speculated about their fall, but now he wondered if Sofia was somehow tied to their legacy. In her room, Sofia lay awake, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Her thoughts swirled with fragments of a life she had worked so hard to forget. She had promised herself she would never look back, never let herself be pulled into the web of betrayal and loss that had defined her downfall. But something about Gabriel's questions and the way he looked at her made her uneasy. He was digging, and Sofia knew that if he dug deep enough, he would uncover truths she wasn't ready to face. Some secrets, after all, were best left buried. The boutique hotel was a striking mix of old-world charm and modern sophistication, nestled in a quiet corner of the city where time seemed to slow down. Sofia arrived early on her first day, her tattered bag clutched tightly at her side. She stood for a moment outside the entrance, her gaze tracing the intricate ironwork of the gates before stepping inside. The marble floors gleamed under soft lighting, and the faint scent of polished wood lingered in the air. Everything about the place screamed refinement, yet Sofia felt a strange pang of familiarity. Gabriel had arranged for her to meet Clara, the hotel manager, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who greeted Sofia with a polite but wary smile. "You'll be handling inventory and logistics," Clara said briskly, leading Sofia through the labyrinth of hallways and storerooms. "It's not glamorous, but it's important. Mistakes cost money, and we can't afford that." The word money hung in the air, a reminder of the stakes at play. Sofia nodded silently, her mind already calculating how long she would need to hold this job to regain a semblance of stability. She knew the value of money all too well, what it could buy, what it could destroy. Clara handed her a clipboard and a list of supplies to audit. "If you have questions, ask, but don't expect me to hold your hand." Sofia suppressed a smirk. She had no intention of asking for help. Years on the streets had taught her to be self-reliant, to adapt quickly and move unnoticed. As she worked her way through the storeroom, counting linens and checking stock levels, her thoughts drifted to Gabriel. His gesture had been unexpected, even unsettling, but it was impossible to ignore the sense of purpose she felt now. It was as though she had been pulled from the depths and thrust into a world she didn't belong to, but couldn't escape. Hours passed, and Sofia fell into a rhythm, her mind quieting as she focused on the task at hand. Yet, every so often, a stray thought would surface. Memories of grand dinner parties, rooms filled with laughter and ambition. Those were from another life, one she had buried under layers of survival, but the smell of fresh linens and the sound of polished silverware clinking together brought it all rushing back. When her shift ended, Sofia lingered near the entrance, staring out at the city as dusk began to settle. Gabriel's car pulled up moments later, its sleek lines catching the fading light. He stepped out, his expression unreadable as always, and gestured for her to join him. "How was it?" he asked as she slid into the passenger seat. "It's work," she replied tersely, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. "Why do you care?" Gabriel's lips quirked into a faint smile. "I wouldn't have offered if I didn't care." Sofia didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the passing buildings. She didn't trust his kindness, but she couldn't afford to reject it either. The ride back to the mansion was quiet, save for the hum of the engine and the faint sound of Gabriel tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. Back at the estate, Sofia excused herself and retreated to her room. She pulled out her sketchpad, the one item she allowed herself to carry aside from her bag, and began drawing. The lines came quickly, instinctively, forming the outline of a house she hadn't seen in years. Her hand trembled as she added the details. The carved wooden door, the ivy-covered walls, the sprawling garden. It was the Laurent estate, her family's home before everything fell apart. She stared at the finished sketch, her chest tightening. The house wasn't just a memory. It was a symbol of everything she had lost. And now it seemed to haunt her at every turn, from the hotel's decor to the conversations she overheard among the staff. The name Laurent was never mentioned outright, but Sofia couldn't shake the feeling that Gabriel knew more than he was letting on. Meanwhile, in his study, Gabriel pored over old financial records. The name Isabelle Laurent appeared again and again, tied to a series of transactions that had baffled him for years. He had always been curious about the Laurent family's rise and fall, but now his curiosity was personal. Sofia's presence in his life wasn't a coincidence, and he was determined to uncover the truth. His fingers hovered over his keyboard as he debated whether to search further. Something in him hesitated, as though prying into Sofia's past would cross a line he wasn't sure he wanted to breach. But the questions nagged at him. Who was she really, and why did she seem to know more about the world of wealth and power than she was willing to admit? Late that night, Sofia wandered into the mansion's library, unable to sleep. She traced her fingers along the spines of books she couldn't imagine anyone actually reading. One title caught her attention: The Art of Finance's Building Empires. She pulled it from the shelf, flipping through its pages. The words blurred as her mind raced. Finance had been her family's legacy, their lifeblood. It had also been their downfall. As she closed the book, a faint creak of floorboards startled her. Gabriel stood in the doorway, his gaze heavy with questions he didn't voice. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Sofia nodded, placing the book back on the shelf. "I was just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated, her hand lingering on the book's spine. "How money changes everything." Gabriel's expression darkened. "It does. But sometimes it's not the money, it's the people." The words hung between them, unspoken truth simmering just beneath the surface. Sofia felt a chill crawl up her spine as she realized Gabriel wasn't just speaking in generalities, he was talking about her. As she left the library, Gabriel remained behind, his thoughts tangled in the mysteries that seemed to follow Sofia wherever she went. He knew they were on the cusp of something that would either shatter the fragile trust between them or reveal the connection that had drawn them together in the first place. The boutique hotel buzzed with its usual understated elegance, the kind that whispered wealth instead of flaunting it. Sofia had fallen into a rhythm at work, balancing her tasks with a quiet efficiency that drew minimal attention. But today, something felt different. The subtle tension in the air, the hushed conversations among staff. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Gabriel had called an impromptu meeting with Clara and several department heads. Sofia, while not part of the inner circle, couldn't help but overhear snippets of their discussion as she moved between inventory rooms. Words like financial restructuring and loss projections floated through the air, laced with urgency. It wasn't her place to eavesdrop, but the fragments of conversation stirred something in her. The language of finances was one she knew intimately, even if she hadn't spoken it in years. Later that afternoon, as Sofia finished her audit, Clara approached her with a clipboard. "We need these numbers cross-checked by tomorrow," she said brusquely, her tone as sharp as ever. But her gaze lingered on Sofia for a moment longer than usual, as if trying to decode something about her. "You seem more comfortable here than most new hires." Sofia shrugged, keeping her response neutral. "It's just numbers. They make sense." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, her curiosity evident but unspoken. "Well, don't make mistakes. Gabriel doesn't tolerate errors when it comes to money." The mention of his name sent a jolt through Sofia, though she hid it well. She had been careful to maintain her distance from Gabriel during her time at the hotel, speaking to him only when necessary, but she couldn't shake the feeling that his presence loomed over her, even in his absence. That evening, back at the mansion, Gabriel poured himself a drink in the study, his mind weighed down by the day's developments. The hotel's finances were more precarious than he had anticipated, and he was beginning to suspect that someone within his organization might be siphoning funds. It was a problem he had encountered before, a subtle betrayal disguised as clerical error. But this time, the stakes felt higher. As he stared into the amber liquid in his glass, Gabriel's thoughts drifted to Sofia. She had become an enigma he couldn't ignore, her guarded demeanor a puzzle he was determined to solve. There was a precision to her work at the hotel, a familiarity with systems and structures that hinted at a background far removed from the streets. He had seen flashes of her knowledge in small, unintentional ways, the way she had reorganized a storage room for maximum efficiency, the casual mention of financial terms most people in her position wouldn't know. Gabriel set his glass down and pulled up the Laurent file on his laptop. He had spent years following the family's downfall, intrigued by their meteoric rise and catastrophic collapse. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that Sofia was connected to them. But what still eluded him was why she had chosen to disappear, and why she had re-emerged now in his world. Meanwhile, Sofia sat on the edge of her bed, her sketchpad open on her lap. She had started another drawing, this one less precise but no less haunting. It depicted a young woman standing on the steps of a grand estate, her face turned away as though she couldn't bear to look back. The scene was painfully familiar, a snapshot of the moment her old life had crumbled into dust. She closed the sketchpad abruptly, her hands trembling. The past was a trap, and she couldn't afford to fall into it now. But no matter how far she ran, it seemed to follow her, weaving its way into her new reality. The sound of footsteps outside her door startled her, and she quickly tucked the sketchpad under her pillow. A knock followed, soft but insistent. "Sofia," Gabriel's voice came from the other side. "Can we talk?" Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Give me a minute," she called out, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. When she opened the door, Gabriel stood there, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to check on how things are going at the hotel," he said, though his tone suggested there was more to his visit. "It's fine," she replied tersely. "Clara seems thorough." He nodded, his gaze searching hers. "And you? How are you managing?" Sofia crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm surviving." "That's not what I asked." The directness of his question caught her off guard, and for a moment she considered shutting the door in his face. But something in his expression stopped her, a mix of curiosity and concern that felt disarmingly genuine. "I'm fine," she said finally, her voice softer. "Why does it matter to you?" Gabriel hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Because I don't believe in coincidences, and I don't believe you ended up here by accident." Sofia's breath caught, her defenses rising. "What are you implying?" "I'm not sure yet," he admitted, "but I intend to find out." His words lingered as he walked away, leaving Sofia standing in the doorway, her heart pounding. She knew Gabriel was getting closer to the truth, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep him at bay. But as the pieces of her past began to resurface, one thing became clear: she wasn't the only one with secrets. In the quiet of the night, Gabriel returned to his study, the Laurent file still open on his screen. He scrolled through the names, dates, and transactions, searching for the missing link that would connect Sofia to the family's legacy. Somewhere in the data, he was certain, lay the answers he sought. And in her room, Sofia sat awake, the sketchpad once again in her hands. This time, she added a shadowy figure in the background of the estate, an ominous presence that loomed over the young woman like a storm cloud. It was a memory she had tried to bury, but now it clawed its way back to the surface, demanding to be reckoned with. The boutique hotel had never been more alive. A weekend gala was underway, filling its halls with the soft hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, and the subdued laughter of the city's elite. Sofia watched from the edges of the gathering, her presence almost invisible. She had been tasked with overseeing last-minute adjustments to the inventory, ensuring the linens were pristine, the champagne fully stocked, and the details flawless. It was a position of quiet control, one she found strangely familiar. Gabriel arrived late, his presence commanding attention the moment he entered the room. Dressed in a tailored suit, he moved through the crowd with an effortless charisma, exchanging pleasantries and measured smiles. From her vantage point, Sofia couldn't help but study him. He was a man of precision, every step calculated, every word deliberate. But there was an unease in his posture tonight, a tension that hinted at something beneath his polished exterior. As Sofia retreated to the storage area to finalize her tasks, the sound of her name stopped her in her tracks. A man's voice, low, curious, and tinged with recognition. "Sofia? No. Isabel?" She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Turning slowly, she found herself face to face with a man whose tailored appearance and sharp eyes were all too familiar. He was older now, his face etched with lines of ambition and betrayal, but she recognized him instantly. Victor Laurent, her father's former business partner. "You've been hiding," Victor said, his tone laced with mockery. "And here I thought the Laurents had vanished completely." Sofia's mind raced. She had spent years avoiding people like Victor, those who had clawed their way to power at the expense of her family. His presence here wasn't a coincidence. It was a threat. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Victor smirked, leaning closer. "You can change your name, Isabel, but you can't change who you are, or what you know." Before she could respond, Gabriel's voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Victor straightened, his expression shifting to one of feigned cordiality. "Not at all, just catching up with an old acquaintance." Gabriel's eyes darted to Sofia, who avoided his gaze. "Well, if you'll excuse us, we have work to finish." Victor lingered for a moment before nodding. "Of course. I'll see you around, Sofia." As soon as he was gone, Gabriel turned to her, his expression dark. "What was that about?" "Nothing," Sofia replied quickly. "He's mistaken me for someone else." Gabriel didn't believe her, but he let it slide for the moment. "Be careful," he said, his voice low. "Men like Victor don't approach people without a reason." Later that night, Gabriel found himself replaying the encounter in his mind. Victor's presence at the gala was troubling enough. He was a known opportunist with a reputation for exploiting the vulnerable. But the way he had addressed Sofia, the name he had used, it stirred something in Gabriel. He knew there was more to Sofia's story, and he was beginning to piece together the edges of a much larger puzzle. In her room, Sofia paced, her mind in turmoil. Victor's appearance was no accident. He had found her, and now the fragile stability she had begun to rebuild was at risk of crumbling. She opened her bag, pulling out a small stack of documents she had managed to salvage from her old life. They were stained and faded, but they told a story of betrayal and greed, the story of her family's destruction. At the center of it all was Victor Laurent. The next morning, Sofia arrived at the hotel with a renewed sense of resolve. She couldn't let Victor derail her now. As she moved through her tasks, she overheard snippets of conversation between Clara and Gabriel in the office. The words financial discrepancies and internal audit caught her attention, sending a chill down her spine. It wasn't just her past that was unraveling. Gabriel's empire was under threat, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Victor was somehow involved. That evening, Gabriel confronted Sofia directly. "Who is Victor Laurent to you?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for evasion. She hesitated, her mind racing. "He was involved with my family, a long time ago." "Involved how?" Sofia took a deep breath, her eyes meeting his. "He was my father's business partner, and the man who helped destroy everything we had." Gabriel's expression hardened. "So it's true, you're connected to the Lawrence." "It doesn't matter," Sofia said quickly, "that life is over." "It matters to me," he replied, his voice firm. "Victor isn't here by coincidence. If he's targeting you, he's targeting me too." Sofia's defenses crumbled, and she allowed herself to share fragments of the truth, the rise and fall of her family, the betrayal that had left them penniless, and the secrets she had carried ever since. Gabriel listened intently, his own suspicions confirmed, but his respect for her deepening. "We're not so different, you and I," he said quietly when she finished. "We've both built walls to protect ourselves from a world that only sees opportunity in weakness." Sofia looked away, her heart heavy with the weight of her revelations. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Now, we figure out what Victor wants, and we stop him." But as the night deepened, both of them knew the battle ahead wouldn't be simple. Victor wasn't just a threat from Sofia's past, he was a storm gathering on the horizon, one that neither of them could outrun. The days following Victor's reappearance unfolded like a storm building on the horizon. Gabriel threw himself into his work, poring over financial records and scrutinizing every transaction tied to his businesses. The whispers of financial discrepancies had grown louder, and he couldn't ignore the signs anymore. Someone was manipulating his empire from the inside, and Victor's sudden presence couldn't be a coincidence. Sofia, meanwhile, operated under a veil of tension. Every step she took at the hotel felt heavier, as if Victor's shadow followed her. Though she tried to focus on her work, her mind lingered on the confrontation. The look in Victor's eyes had been more than recognition. It was calculation. He knew something she didn't, and that terrified her. One evening, as Sofia prepared to leave the hotel, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the building. The driver stepped out, holding the door open, and Victor emerged with the ease of someone who knew the power he wielded. He smiled when he saw her, but the gesture was devoid of warmth. "Isabel," he greeted, his voice smooth and familiar. "We need to talk." Sofia's grip on her bag tightened. "It's Sofia now." Victor chuckled. "You can change your name, but not your blood. You'll always be a Laurent." She didn't respond, her silence a shield against his probing words. Victor gestured toward the car. "Get in. I promise I won't bite." Sofia hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, but the lure of answers, of understanding why Victor had resurfaced now, drew her closer. Reluctantly, she stepped inside. The car was luxurious, the faint scent of leather and cologne filling the space. Victor leaned back, his demeanor calm but watchful. "You've been hiding well," he began. "But you should know, the past has a way of catching up to people, especially when money is involved." Sofia's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" Victor's expression turned serious. I want what was taken from me. Your family wasn't the only one who lost everything." She scoffed. "You were part of the betrayal. Don't pretend to be a victim." Victor's smile faded, replaced by a cold intensity. "You don't know the full story, Isabel. Your father made enemies, powerful ones. I tried to protect the business, but he wouldn't listen. And now, here we are picking up the pieces." Sofia didn't trust a word he said. "Why are you here, Victor? Why now?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because you're the last piece of the puzzle. Your name may be buried, but your bloodline still holds weight in certain circles. And Gabriel, well, let's just say he's sitting on assets I intend to reclaim." Her stomach churned. Victor's game wasn't just about revenge. It was about power. And Gabriel was caught in the crossfire. When the car pulled up near her apartment, Sofia stepped out without another word, her mind racing. Victor's intentions were clear. He was leveraging her connection to Gabriel to further his own agenda. But what unsettled her most was the realization that Victor wasn't working alone. Someone within Gabriel's circle was feeding him information, and she was determined to find out who. Back at the mansion, Gabriel was waiting for her in the study, his expression a mixture of relief and frustration. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I've been calling you." Sofia dropped her bag onto the floor, exhaustion etched into her features. "Victor," Gabriel's jaw clenched. "What did he want?" "To remind me of what I've lost, and to warn me that he's coming for you." Gabriel poured himself a drink, the tension in his movements palpable. "Victor isn't a man who makes idle threats. If he's targeting me, he's already made his move." Sofia hesitated before speaking. "There's someone inside your organization feeding him information. It's the only way he could know so much." Gabriel's grip on his glass tightened. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet," she admitted, "but I'll find it." For the first time, Gabriel saw something in Sofia he hadn't before: resolve. She wasn't just a woman running from her past. She was someone willing to fight for the future, even if it meant facing the very people who had betrayed her. The next day, Gabriel began his own investigation, quietly reviewing employee records and tracking financial anomalies. He didn't trust easily, and now even his closest allies were under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Sofia returned to the hotel, her eyes sharper, her movements deliberate. She started paying closer attention to Clara and the other staff, noting their routines and conversations. Every interaction felt like a potential clue, every detail a thread that might unravel the web Victor had spun. But as the hours passed, Sofia couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The hotel's polished surfaces reflected more than just opulence. They mirrored her unease. And when she caught a fleeting glimpse of a man in the lobby, a face she couldn't place but instinctively feared, her pulse quickened. Gabriel, too, felt the weight of impending confrontation. As he sat in his office late that night, sifting through files and emails, a single message caught his attention. It was an anonymous tip, cryptic but pointed. "Trust no one. He's closer than you think." The message sent a chill down his spine. Victor's reach was broader than he had anticipated, and the betrayal he feared was no longer a distant threat. It was in his house, his business, his life. And it was closing in. The quiet of the boutique hotel late at night felt almost eerie, its elegant hallways bathed in the soft glow of dimmed chandeliers. Sofia lingered near the back office, her eyes scanning the ledgers Clara had left open on her desk. The numbers didn't add up. There were discrepancies, small ones scattered across multiple accounts, but they formed a pattern. Someone was siphoning money, and Sofia was certain it wasn't an accident. Her breath hitched when she heard approaching footsteps. Quickly, she moved away from the desk, blending into the shadows of the storeroom. Through the crack in the door, she watched as Clara entered the office, her expression tense. She pulled out her phone, speaking in a hushed tone. "It's under control," Clara said, her voice sharp. "He hasn't noticed yet, but we need to move faster. If Gabriel starts digging deeper, this could blow up in our faces." Sofia's pulse raced. Clara was the mole, the one feeding Victor information. The realization was both shocking and unsurprising. Clara had always carried herself with a calculating precision, and now Sofia understood why. But Clara wasn't finished. "Sofia?" she said into the phone, her tone shifting to one of disdain. "She's just a pawn. Don't worry about her." The words stung more than Sofia expected, but they also steeled her resolve. She slipped out of the storeroom as quietly as she had entered, her mind already forming a plan. She couldn't confront Clara, not yet. She needed proof, something undeniable that would expose her connection to Victor. Back at the mansion, Gabriel sat in his study, staring at the cryptic message on his laptop. "Trust no one. He's closer than you think." The words gnawed at him, their ambiguity leaving him restless. His instinct told him Sofia was on his side, but doubts lingered. He had been betrayed before, and trusting anyone in the high-stakes world of business was a risk he couldn't afford. When Sofia arrived, her face was set with determination. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. Gabriel looked up from his desk. "What is it?" "It's Clara," she said. "She's working with Victor. I heard her on the phone." His eyes narrowed. "Did she say anything specific?" "Not enough," Sofia admitted. "But she mentioned you. She knows you're starting to investigate, and she's getting nervous." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, processing her words. If Clara was involved, it explained the financial discrepancies and Victor's sudden interest in his empire. But it also meant that the betrayal was deeper than he'd feared. "We need proof," Gabriel said finally. "If we confront her without it, she'll deny everything." Sofia nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "I'll find it." Over the next few days, Sofia began observing Clara more closely, taking mental notes of her routines and conversations. It wasn't easy. Clara was meticulous and guarded, but Sofia's years of survival had taught her how to move unnoticed. She uncovered small but damning details. A hidden ledger Clara kept locked in her desk, emails sent from her private account, and a series of phone calls made late at night. As Sofia pieced together the puzzle, Gabriel worked from his end, quietly enlisting the help of a trusted IT specialist to trace the source of the financial anomalies. What they found confirmed Sofia's suspicions. Clara had been funneling money out of the business into offshore accounts, using shell companies tied to Victor. One evening, as Gabriel and Sofia reviewed the evidence in his study, a knock interrupted them. Gabriel opened the door to find Victor standing there, his presence as unnerving as ever. "Gabriel," Victor said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We need to talk." Gabriel stepped aside reluctantly, motioning for Victor to enter. Sofia stayed in the corner of the room, her posture tense but composed. Victor's gaze flicked to her briefly before returning to Gabriel. "You've been busy," Victor said, his tone casual. "Digging into things that don't concern you." "They concern me when they threaten my business," Gabriel replied coolly, "and when they involve people I trust." Victor's smile widened. "Trust is a dangerous thing, Gabriel, especially when you don't know who you're dealing with." The tension in the room was palpable, the unspoken threat hanging in the air. Sofia felt her heart pound as Victor turned his attention to her. "And you, Isabel," he said, using her true name like a weapon, "still trying to play the innocent, or have you finally told Gabriel the truth?" Sofia's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Gabriel stepped between them, his voice firm. "Whatever game you're playing, it ends now. I have the evidence to take you down." Victor's expression darkened, his charm replaced by cold fury. "Do you really think you've won? This isn't about you, Gabriel. It's about her. And if you think you can protect her, you're more naive than I thought." With that, Victor turned and left, his parting words lingering like a shadow over the room. Gabriel closed the door, his fists clenched. "He's not bluffing," he said. "He's planning something, and we need to be ready." Sofia nodded, her resolve unwavering. "Then we fight back." As the night deepened, they began to formulate a plan, one that would expose Clara, dismantle Victor's schemes, and protect the fragile alliance they had built. But both of them knew the stakes were higher than ever. The battle ahead wouldn't just test their strength, it would reveal the depths of their loyalty and the secrets they had yet to face. The air in Gabriel's study was thick with tension as the first rays of dawn crept through the window. Papers and files lay scattered across the mahogany desk, illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp. Gabriel and Sofia sat opposite each other, their exhaustion apparent, but their determination unwavering. "We have enough to confront Clara," Gabriel said, his voice low but firm. "The ledgers, the offshore accounts, the emails, they all point back to her. But Victor's not going to let this end with her." Sofia nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her sketchpad absently. "Clara's just a pawn. Victor's after something bigger." Gabriel leaned back, his eyes narrowing. He's after you, Sofia, or Isabel. Whatever name you want to use." Sofia flinched at the sound of her old name but didn't look away. "If he thinks I'm the key to whatever he's planning, then maybe I can use that." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "You're not bait." "I don't want to be," she replied. "But if it's the only way to stop him, I'll do it." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy between them. Gabriel hated the idea of risking her safety, but he couldn't deny that Sofia was right. Victor's obsession with her meant she was central to his plans, and that gave them an advantage if they could outmaneuver him. Later that day, Sofia returned to the boutique hotel with a new sense of purpose. She moved through her tasks with practiced ease, her eyes and ears tuned to every detail around her. Clara's movements, the conversations of the staff, even the smallest anomalies, everything was a potential clue. Gabriel had given her access to the hotel's internal systems, and she used the opportunity to dig deeper into Clara's activities. What she found only confirmed their suspicions. Clara's network was larger than they had anticipated, with connections to suppliers, contractors, and even local officials. Victor wasn't just siphoning money, he was building influence, using Gabriel's empire as a foundation for his own ambitions. That evening, Gabriel called a meeting at the mansion. Sofia, Clara, and several key staff members were present. The atmosphere was tense, the air crackling with unspoken accusations. Gabriel stood at the head of the table, his expression calm but commanding. "We've discovered discrepancies in the hotel's accounts," he began, his tone measured. "Large sums of money have been funneled into offshore accounts, and we've traced those transactions back to someone in this room." Clara's eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. "Are you accusing me?" Gabriel's gaze didn't waver. "The evidence speaks for itself." Sofia watched as Clara's mask slipped for just a moment, her expression betraying a flicker of fear. But Clara recovered quickly, her voice rising in indignation. "This is ridiculous. I've been loyal to this company for years. If there's a problem, it's not because of me." Gabriel stepped closer, dropping a stack of papers onto the table. "These are copies of the transactions, your email headers, and the shell companies tied to Victor Laurent." The room fell silent, all eyes on Clara. For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. Then her expression hardened and she let out a bitter laugh. "You think you're so clever," Clara said, her voice dripping with venom. "But you have no idea what you're up against." Sofia's stomach twisted as Clara's words sank in. This wasn't just about money or power, it was personal. And Clara was about to make her move. Before Gabriel could respond, Clara stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You can fire me, investigate me, do whatever you want, but this won't stop Victor. He's smarter than you, stronger, and when he's finished, you'll both wish you'd never crossed him." With that, Clara stormed out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Gabriel turned to Sofia, his expression grim. "This isn't over." "No," Sofia said quietly, her mind racing. "It's just beginning." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Gabriel tightened security around his businesses, cutting off access points Victor might exploit. Sofia worked alongside him, her knowledge of Victor's methods proving invaluable. They knew the confrontation with Victor was inevitable, but neither of them was prepared for how quickly it would come. One evening, as Sofia returned to the mansion, she found a note tucked into her bag. The handwriting was familiar, its message chilling. "You can't outrun your past. Meet me or Gabriel pays the price." Her hands trembled as she read the words. Victor was escalating, and now he was threatening the one person who had given her a chance to rebuild her life. Sofia knew what she had to do, even if it meant facing Victor alone. That night, as Gabriel worked in his study, Sofia approached him. "I need to go," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Gabriel looked up, alarm flashing in his eyes. "Go where?" "To Victor," she replied. "He's threatening you, Gabriel. I can't let him drag you into this any further." Gabriel stood, his expression dark. "You're not going anywhere alone. This is my fight as much as yours." Sofia shook her head. "No, it's not. He's using me to get to you. If I confront him, I can end this." Gabriel stepped closer, his voice firm. "We end this together." The determination in his voice left no room for argument. Sofia felt a surge of gratitude, but also fear. She knew the risks they were taking, the dangers that lay ahead, but for the first time she didn't feel alone. As they prepared for the confrontation, Sofia couldn't shake the feeling that Victor had planned every move in advance. He was a master of manipulation, and she and Gabriel were stepping directly into his trap. But they had no choice. The only way to dismantle his web of lies and betrayal was to face him head-on. And when the moment came, they would be ready. The air was thick with tension as Sofia and Gabriel arrived at the secluded location Victor had chosen for their meeting. It was an old warehouse on the edge of the city, its towering structure looming like a sentinel in the darkness. The faint hum of the city beyond felt distant, muffled by the weight of what was to come. Gabriel stepped out of the car first, his eyes scanning the area with the precision of someone accustomed to assessing risks. Sofia followed, clutching her bag tightly. Inside, it were fragments of her old life, evidence of the betrayal that had destroyed her family, pieces of the truth she hoped would expose Victor once and for all. The warehouse doors creaked open as they approached, revealing Victor standing in the center of the vast, dimly lit space. His posture was relaxed, his expression smug, as though he had already won. Beside him stood Clara, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. A few other figures lingered in the shadows, their presence a silent reminder of Victor's power. "Ah, Gabriel, Isabel," Victor greeted, his voice smooth and mocking. "So good of you to join us. I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve." "Cut the theatrics, Victor," Gabriel said sharply. "You wanted us here. What do you want?" Victor chuckled, his gaze shifting to Sofia. "Oh, I think you know. This isn't about money or power, it's about legacy. And you, Isabel, are the last thread of a legacy I intend to erase." Sofia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You've already taken everything from me. What more could you possibly want?" "Validation," Victor replied, his eyes narrowing. "Your father always saw me as second best, an accessory to his empire. but I was the one who kept it afloat while he played the hero. And now, I'll take what's rightfully mine." Gabriel moved to stand beside Sofia, his presence a steadying force. "You've spent years chasing a ghost, Victor, but this ends tonight." Victor's smile faltered, his composure cracking just enough for Gabriel to notice. "Bold words, Gabriel, but you're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and out of your depth." Sofia reached into her bag, pulling out the documents she had brought. She held them up, her voice ringing with defiance. "You think you've won, but you've left a trail. Offshore accounts, shell companies, forged signatures, it's all here. The same tactics you used to destroy my family, you're now using to build your empire. And I have proof." Victor's expression darkened, his confidence visibly shaken. Clara shifted uncomfortably beside him, her loyalty wavering in the face of Sofia's revelations. "You underestimate me, Isabel," Victor said, his voice laced with anger. "Do you really think anyone will believe the words of a disgraced Laurent? You're nothing." Gabriel stepped forward, his voice cold and commanding. "She's not nothing, and neither is this." He tossed a USB drive onto the table between them. "It's over, Victor. The files have already been sent to the authorities. This meeting, it's just a courtesy." The room fell silent, the weight of Gabriel's words sinking in. For the first time, Victor's mask of control slipped, revealing the fear and desperation beneath. "You think this is over?" Victor sneered. "You're both fools. You have no idea what's coming." Before either of them could respond, Clara spoke, her voice trembling. "He's lying. He always lies." Victor turned to her, fury etched into his face. "What are you doing?" "I'm done," Clara said, stepping away from him. "I've covered for you, betrayed people for you, but I'm not going down with you." Her words were the final blow to Victor's crumbling facade. He lunged for her, but Gabriel intercepted him, grabbing his arm and pinning him against the table. "Enough," Gabriel said, his voice a low growl. "It's over." As the authorities arrived, summoned by Gabriel's earlier call, Sofia felt a wave of relief mixed with lingering unease. Victor had been exposed, his network dismantled, but she knew the scars of his actions would linger for years. Later, back at the mansion, Gabriel poured 2 glasses of scotch, handing one to Sofia as they sat in the study. The tension between them had eased, replaced by a quiet understanding. "You didn't have to come tonight," Sofia said, her voice soft. "You could have walked away." Gabriel studied her for a moment before responding. "So could you, but neither of us is built that way." Sofia nodded, her gaze distant. "I don't know what's next. For me, for any of this." Gabriel smiled faintly. "You start over. We both do." As the night deepened, Sofia realized that for the first time in years, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever: hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but she wasn't walking it alone. The morning was unusually calm, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm has passed. The city, with its ceaseless hum of life, seemed distant as Sofia stood on the balcony of Gabriel's mansion, the cool breeze brushing against her face. She gripped the railing, her thoughts swirling. The confrontation with Victor had ended, but the weight of everything it unearthed still lingered. Gabriel joined her, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. "I didn't think you were the type to enjoy the quiet," he said, his voice breaking the silence. "I'm not used to it," Sofia admitted, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "But maybe I could be." Gabriel leaned against the railing beside her, his gaze contemplative. "It's not over, you know. Even with Victor gone, there will be questions, investigations. You're tied to this as much as I am." Sofia nodded, her fingers tightening around the mug. "I know, but this time, I'm not running." Gabriel glanced at her, a small smile playing on his lips. "Good. Because I could use someone like you on my team." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You don't stop, do you?" "Not when I see potential," he replied. "You've proven yourself, Sofia. Or should I say, Isabel?" Her laughter faded, replaced by a thoughtful silence. "Sofia feels more real now," she said. "Isabel. She's part of the past, and I'm finally ready to let her go." The moment between them was interrupted by the sound of Gabriel's phone buzzing on the table behind them. He sighed, setting his coffee down and answering the call. As he spoke, Sofia's thoughts drifted to everything they had faced together, the betrayals, the risks, and the trust they had built in the process. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming what she'd lost, and maybe even finding something new. When Gabriel returned, his expression was serious. "That was the legal team. The authorities are moving fast. Victor's assets are being frozen, and Clara has already agreed to cooperate." Sofia nodded. "And what about us?" Gabriel hesitated before answering. "They'll want statements from both of us. Your connection to the Lawrence is going to draw attention, but the evidence you provided has already shifted the narrative." Sofia let out a slow breath, the enormity of the situation sinking in. "So, the world will know who I am. Not just who you were," Gabriel corrected, "but who you've become." His words lingered, filling her with a quiet strength. She had spent so long hiding, afraid of the shadows of her past. But now she felt ready to face them. As they moved back inside, Gabriel paused. "Sofia, there's something I want to ask." She turned to him, her brow furrowed. "What is it? Why did you trust me? After everything you've been through, why did you stay?" Sofia's lips curved into a faint smile. "Because you didn't treat me like a charity case. You gave me a chance to prove myself. And you listened." Gabriel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed." The days that followed were a whirlwind of interviews, meetings, and rebuilding. Gabriel's businesses weathered the storm, strengthened by the transparency he brought to the aftermath of Victor's betrayal. Sofia, too, began to carve out a new role for herself, one that embraced both her past and her future. And as they stood together at the grand opening of the refurbished boutique hotel, now a symbol of resilience and transformation, Sofia felt a sense of closure she hadn't thought possible. The applause of the crowd, the flashes of cameras, and the warmth of Gabriel's smile reminded her that even the darkest chapters could lead to new beginnings. As the night wound down, Gabriel raised a glass to the gathered guests. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "and to the strength it takes to face the past and build a future." Sofia raised her glass as well, her eyes meeting his. In that moment, she knew that the journey wasn't over, but it was hers to shape. What did you think of Sofia's journey? Did her story resonate with you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to keep following stories like this one. The twists, the challenges, the triumphs, there's always more to come.